Hey guys, it's William Angel here, and welcome back to every episode of The Simpsons Season 10 Reviewed. So, by this point, The Simpsons have been on the air for a decade. Now, I know it doesn't seem like much now, but at the time, that was a pretty big deal. Now, as with pretty much every season from this point onwards, this one is rather contentious and controversial, so I don't know what I'm going to get out of these episodes, but I guess we'll find out. So, if you have been following this series, so far you'll know that I'm of the opinion that Season 9, while still being fun to watch, was a decline from the classic era. Now, the common opinion on Season 10 is that it continues that decline and really marks a new era of the show, until the HD era starts at Season 20. Mike Scully continues, of course, as a showrunner here, having started the previous year. Other notable things about the staff makeup here is that Al Jean returned to the show full-time for the first time since Season 4. He had done bits and bobs on the show since then, and obviously he left to work on The Critic, but I guess it is nice to see him back for this season, and indeed, he will be back pretty much indefinitely going forward. Before we begin, I just want to say that I'm not here to be constantly down on this era of the show. I mean, that would be fun, would it? I've still got a lot of these seasons left to watch, so I'm going to at least try and remain positive throughout these reviews. I know for a fact that the teen seasons do have a lot of fun episodes in them, and even the bad stuff from this era tends to be bad in an interesting way, unlike say some of the more recent seasons from the show, which are just downright boring. For that reason, even though I'm definitely expecting some ups and downs, I'm not a total hater of this era, and as such, I will still enjoy watching these seasons. I hope at least some of you enjoy going through them with me, because indeed we still have a long way to go before we finish the show, and I mean a long way to go. Anyway, a quick thank you to The Simpsons Wiki for helping me with the trivia for these episodes as always, and with that out of the way, let's take a look at this season, shall we? Season 10, Episode 1, Lord of the Dance. Lisa is chosen to introduce a new student who soon starts a new trend at the school. Meanwhile, Homer and Bart start a new grease recycling business. So some trivia here is that Lisa's new appearance is meant to look similar to the new look that Sandy gets in the film Grease. My best moment was Homer's banter with groundskeeper Willie. The season starts off with a 3 out of 5. So yeah, we start off season 10 with an episode that I found kind of odd. There were some clever and funny jokes here, but there are also many obvious ones that lack any bite. My biggest problem here is that the main plot of Lisa getting a new rival is just kind of boring. Alex is kind of annoying, and the fact that she wows the kids with things like earrings and cell phones makes this seem kind of dated to me. I mean, I highly doubt that those things would wow kids nowadays, given that most of them will probably have a phone of some kind. The message of kids should be kids is fine, I suppose, but it was not really expanded upon in any way. They just kind of ended the episode throwing grease at each other. The side plot, although simple, fared much better in my opinion. I liked Homer's antics throughout, and how obsessed he was by making grease his new livelihood. This is also where the best jokes come from. I like the Grease and Shovel Racket Company, and Homer's line to the squeaky voiced teen of, "My God, you're greasy." The best bit though was Homer's exchange with Willie. I love the absurdity of Homer accusing Willie of not really being from Scotland. He kind of deserved to be strangled for that one. Bart feels kind of tacked on to this subplot though. We get glimpses of him feeling sad at missing school, which is kind of out of character. Now, following Homer around collecting grease is hardly a fun substitute for school, so I can at least understand it a bit. The problem is though, we get no payoff from this angle at all. So yeah, this was kind of a weird start to the season for me. There were some highs and lows here, and overall, it balances out to be an average episode. Season 10, Episode 2, The Wizard of Evergreen Terrace. When Homer realizes that he hasn't accomplished anything meaningful in life, he decides to become an inventor like his new idol, Thomas Edison. So this episode's title is a nod to a Thomas Edison nickname, the Wizard of Menlo Park. My best moment was Homer showing off his inventions to his family. So do I like Homer trying his hand at inventing? Yes I do, this is a 4 out of 5. Well, Homer becoming an inventor is certainly not what you would expect, but I felt that they made it work pretty well. This is a John Swartzwelder episode, and you can see some of his brand of humour on offer here for sure, and that is the episode's strength. The plot is a fairly simple one of Homer getting a new hobby, so it is a good thing that it doesn't take itself too seriously. The inventions that Homer comes up with are all interesting, even if they're not that practical. The scene where he shows them off is just genius though. I love Homer's line of, "Women will like what I tell them to like." I mean, say what you want about Homer, but he clearly knows something about how marketing works. I also liked how the electric hammer comes up again at the end, where Edison's descendants profit off of it. To be fair, the electric hammer was not even a bad idea, I don't care what anyone says. There were also a few good lines from Kent Brockman here, which I found quite amusing. One thing which slightly held this back was the first act. It took a while to really get going and was maybe a bit too slow paced at the start. There was still more than enough good stuff here overall though, to make this an enjoyable episode. Season 10, Episode 3, Bart the Mother. Bart accidentally kills a mother bird with Nelson's BB gun and tries his best to raise the mother's eggs on his own. But the hatchlings turn out to be a pair of destructive lizards that threaten the town's bird population. Okay, so some trivia here is that this is the last speaking role of Troy McClure, due to of course Phil Hartman's tragic death. This episode was also dedicated to Phil Hartman. My best moment was Homer and Milhouse shouting at each other from across the town. Bart becoming a mother gets a 4 out of 5. I quite enjoyed the storyline here. Bart, Marge, and even Nelson are well characterized and help make you care about what is going on. Bart's reaction to killing this bird is to be expected, as he's always shown to be caring when push comes to shove. It is also nice to see how he takes responsibility and works to fix the situation. The moments with him and Marge are well done and are somewhat reminiscent to Marge Be Not Proud. Now don't get me wrong, it's not done nearly as well as in that episode, but the idea of Marge letting Bart do his own thing plays out the same way here as it does in that episode. Also, Marge forgives him in the end and lets Bart run off with his lizards. Speaking of those pesky lizards, they are a bit of a random addition to the story, and they do mess with the flow a bit. That being said, they do add some conflict to the plot, and give Bart a real choice to make. I also like how, at the end, Lisa points out that Bart cared much more about the single bird that he personally killed compared to the thousands that he indirectly killed by releasing the lizards. That is not a bad thing on his part. It's just human nature to have a more emotional reaction to things that you directly do. Anyway, in terms of the jokes, they were pretty hit and miss for me, which is why this is not a 5. For every Homer and Milhouse shouting match you also have lazy jokes like Homer falling down the basement over and over again. Not only is that not particularly funny, they also had to change the location of the basement to make it work. These type of things hold the episode back for me just a bit. Season 10, Episode 4, Treehouse of Horror 9. The 3 short stories this year are Hell to Pay, The Terror of Tiny Toon, and Starship Poopers. My trivia here is that in the intro of the episode, the garage door was pink instead of its usual peach colour. My best moment was the explanation of how Marge was artificially inseminated by Kang. This gets a 5 out of 5. This is yet another year where the Treehouse of Horror special delivers. The first part was very enjoyable. It is an engaging premise to have Snake killing everyone from beyond the grave via a hair transplant. There are quite a few funny lines here, like Lisa saying capital punishment is not a deterrent in the response to the Snake killings. I also liked how Marge shut Lisa down when she tried to explain the obvious that Snake's hair was controlling Homer. The deaths of Apu and Mo were also quite creative in just how gruesome they were. The second segment was also an interesting one. The kids hopping into the TV and interacting with Itchy and Scratchy threw up some great moments. I love how it parodies the cliche cartoon logic, like drawing an eject button on a seat and having a hose shooting piranhas. It even has something outside the box when they get into a live action cooking show while hopping through the channels. That's the second time up until this point that a live action sequence has been shown in a Treehouse of Horror episode. Scratchy falling in love with Snowball at the end is also a nice little moment. Well, maybe not for him, because he has to be neutered. The final part was definitely the weirdest of the 3. Having Kang turn out to be Maggie's real father is an interesting angle, but they don't really do too much with it. Homer's instant reaction of, "Was he better than me?" was kind of funny, as was the ending where the family trick Kang and Kodos into destroying all of the politicians. Other than that though, there were not many jokes in this part, and the Jerry Springer appearance was kind of predictable. All in all, this was not one of the funniest Treehouse of Horrors ever, but I would say it is one of the more interesting and creative ones. And for that alone, I think very highly of this episode. Season 10, Episode 5, When You Dish Upon a Star. While at Lake Springfield, Homer gets involved in a parasailing accident and ends up crash landing in Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger's holiday home. So as you might expect, there are many films and TV shows referenced in this episode. They include Yogi Bear, Happy Days, The Terminator, and even Jurassic Park. My best moment was The Museum of Hollywood Jerks. I gave this one a 3 out of 5, and as that rating suggests, I have a mixed opinion on this. On one hand, there is not much to the plot. It did feel like an excuse to include some celebrities in a big role. That's probably why this episode got a bit of a bad rap amongst the Simpsons fans. Despite that though, I do think that there were a number of solid jokes throughout, and they at least tried to make this fun. An example of this is when the family first arrive at the beach, it's just nice to get a sense of their idea of fun in those scenes. They certainly have a happy-go-lucky type feel to them. Homer is a bit over the top at times, sure, but he produces some nice moments, such as his Peter joke and his rant about Ray Bolger looking out for Ray Bolger. The ending is silly with that car chase and court scene, but the way Ron Howard fails miserably to jump onto the van was kinda funny. I don't have much else to say here. I know a lot of people really hate this one, but I don't really feel that strongly about it one way or the other. Season 10, Episode 6, Dough in the Wind. Homer sets out to determine what his middle initial stands for. In the process, he meets with two of his mother's old friends. They remind Homer of her days as a radical in the 60s, and he decides to give the hippie lifestyle a try. So my trivia for this one is that the hallucination sequence was originally supposed to have 2 additional segments involving Skinner and Apu, but obviously they were cut for the main episode's release. My best moment was Homer finding out that his middle name is actually Jay. I just love his enthusiastic reaction to finding out that J actually stands for Jay. It's a silly moment, but it kinda tickled me for some reason. This episode got a 4 out of 5 rating. This was close to being a 3, I'm not going to lie, but the sense of fun that flowed through the story ended up winning me over. I do like that they delved into Homer's mum's hippie roots and gave us some more of that backstory. I even liked most of Homer's antics here. The sheer enthusiasm in which he embraced the hippie culture helped me get on board with whatever he was planning. Also, even if he did cause some carnage in the episode, he was at least well intentioned here and was only trying to live up to his mother's wishes. The ending though, where he gets shot with his own flower, is sadly the weakest part of the whole story. It was just so abrupt and made little sense either. Thankfully, that only ended up being a minor gripe though, as there were just too many quotes and moments that I found funny in the episode to ignore. Homer's continued use of the song Uptown Girl was great, as was the whole quest to find out his middle name. I also liked Homer's quote about not betraying the ideals that our hippie ancestors refused to go to war and die for. Season 10, Episode 7, Lisa gets an A. Lisa gets hooked on a video game and as such neglects to study for her upcoming test. Scared of failing, she resorts to cheating in order to pass. Meanwhile, Homer buys the baby lobster to save money, but soon becomes attached to him. On the Oscar Myers periodic table that can be seen in the episode, the element molybdenum was replaced by selenium. The rest of the periodic table is mostly unaltered, except for tungsten, which is usually W, but in this episode it's changed to WE. My best moment was Pinchy the lobster. Pretty much all of the scenes involving him, they're the best. I am a massive Pinchy fan, I always have been from the first time I saw this episode. I love that guy. This episode gets a 5 out of 5. I actually found both the main and subplot very enjoyable here. I like how Lisa's story keeps snowballing, with one decision leading to another. Her getting hooked on a video game while sick is an interesting development, and of course it leads to an effective little Crash Bandicoot parody. Her resorting to cheating because of it is not groundbreaking or anything, and the fact that some grant money hangs in a balance based solely on their grade is a little unrealistic. What it does do though is put Lisa in a tough situation. She has to make the decision of telling people the truth or lying for the benefit of the school. I kind of like it in the end, where everyone tricks her with that fake presentation. It is indeed predictable that Lisa would end up telling the truth, so the fact that they pulled off that ruse in order to keep the money was good. Also, the main plot brought us the Super Nintendo Chalmers line from Ralph, which is of course a classic. The subplot with Pinchy was every bit as good in my opinion. I don't know why, but I do really like Pinchy. Pinchy probably is my favourite of all the Simpsons one-off pets. Even though he obviously doesn't talk, he still has a charisma about him, and how he bonds with Homer is kind of adorable in a way. He does of course meet his demise in the end, but even that throws up the hilarious scene of Homer eating the lobster by himself. Rest in peace Pinchy, he would indeed have wanted it that way. Season 10, Episode 8, Homer Simpson in kidney trouble. Thanks to Homer's ignorance, Grandpa suffers a kidney blowout. Homer agrees to step up and offer a donor kidney, but he soon starts to get cold feet. So some trivia is that the very idea of Grandpa suffering a kidney blowout is medically impossible. His bladder would have been the organ to give out long before his kidney, and to be honest he probably would have just peed himself anyway long before that happened. So it's not particularly a good start, is it, when the entire plot is based around something that is literally medically impossible. My best moment was the robots at the ghost town. This episode gets a 1 out of 5. My god, this was awful. I don't even know where to start, to be honest. How about with the first act? It took 6 minutes for anything to even happen. The trip to the ghost town was okay, not particularly funny, but also not bad. Literally right after that though, as the family are driving home, things go downhill. The episode goes out of its way to hammer home the point that it was all Homer's fault that Abe suffered a birth kidney. Why they did this I don't know, because it paints Homer in a bad light right from the start. No matter how much they try to dress it up as him being brave, the fact is that he would not let Grandpa get out of the car, and as such, he should step up and give him his kidney. This is what makes the fact that he runs away so bad. If Homer wasn't the reason why this happened in the first place, and instead, say, the story was about him struggling to find the bravery to give Abe a kidney, then it might have worked. It certainly would have played out a lot better than this did. But when Homer is the one that causes all of the pain, and then runs away at the last minute, the only conclusion to draw from that is that he is an ass. From there we have another pointless 4 minutes, as Homer visits a ship where he is condemned by some random people, and supposedly learns a lesson. Not only was that whole section boring, it was rendered completely irrelevant by the fact that Homer runs away yet again. I mean, come on, enough is enough at this point, surely. Oh, and for anyone who cares, the episode ends with a car falling on Homer, which allows the operation to be done anyway behind his back, without his knowledge. I wish I was making that up, but I'm not. So to wrap up, no lessons were learned, all of the characters come off looking bad, and there were not really any funny moments here either. I think this is the worst episode I've seen so far, even worse than the clip shows. Season 10, Episode 9, Mayor to the Mob. After Homer rescues Mark Hamill and Mayor Quimby from some nerds at a sci-fi convention, he is appointed as the mayor's new bodyguard. Some trivia here is that Ron Haig, the writer of the episode, came up with the idea for the plot. He wanted to use Homer's qualities such as oafishness, strength, thickness, and loyalty for good. My best moment was Homer's new sleeper hold. Another Homer gets the job episode, and it gets a 3 out of 5. I remember watching this one in the past and being very entertained. This time around though, I did not enjoy it quite as much. Don't get me wrong, the plot is still mildly interesting, just for the change of seeing Homer as a bodyguard against nerds. They do make the most of that premise, with Homer having a nice little battle with the mob and in particular Fat Tony, and also of course being the bodyguard for Mark Hamill. You also have that sleeper move that I mentioned to go with a few other solid gags. There were just certain elements of the plot that never clicked with me though. I mean, Homer's moral dilemma over the rat milk was hardly convincing, especially given that he gave the milk to Milhouse anyway. And in the third act, it felt like they were really stretching hard to try and reach that runtime. I also noticed a few odd animation moments also, especially in the crowd scenes. It was not a huge deal, but it was a bit off-putting, and when you combine it with all the other flaws that the episode had, it is enough to knock it back a few pegs, in my estimation. Season 10, Episode 10, Viva Ned Flanders. Ned Flanders asked Homer to show him the secret of living an exciting life, but Homer's plans go haywire when the two head to Vegas and end up getting married to some casino waitresses. So the episode's title is an obvious reference to the film Viva Las Vegas, and the song used during the casino chase scene is Viva Las Vegas by Elvis Presley. My best moment was Homer's dream about the benefits of having 2 wives. You can see what that dream entailed in that picture right there. So 2 extra wives get brought into the equation, and it's only fitting that this episode gets a 2 out of 5. So this plot was rather outrageous at times, and the episode seems to just drift by without ever becoming anything good. There were some okay bits with Ned and his family at the start, and it is certainly believable that he would start getting bored with his life routine. Now, I'm not quite sure that we needed him to be 60 years old to get that point across, but there we go. Once Homer takes Flanders to Vegas, things get really messy. Them combining like this is interesting to some extent, but there are surprisingly few good jokes that they managed to get out of it. And this is mainly because of the execution from that section. All that happens is that Homer and Ned try to run away, which results in a typical chase scene, followed by them being kicked out of Vegas. That's it, that's the ending we get, and it is not satisfying at all. Don't worry though, we get to see this plotline continued in a few seasons time. Oh joy! Season 10, Episode 11, Wild Barts Can't Be Broken. Homer and his drunken friends ransack the elementary school, but the police force identify the town's children as the culprits, and they get punished with a curfew. So, a bit of trivia here is that before switching over to the movie commercial, Milhouse is seen watching the children's TV show Teletubbies. My best moment was the Kids vs Adults song. This one gets a 5 out of 5. This is definitely a story that goes off in a few different tangents, but it remains entertaining all the way through. It starts in a fun way, looking at the Isotopes baseball team. I love the gag of Homer being a plastic sports fan. It is totally him to only care about a winning team and throw them under the bus when they lose. It also leads to a funny little Kent Brockman interview. There you have it. Woo! Once they do end up winning, the celebrations of Homer, Lenny, Carl and Barney are wild, and it kicks off the main plot of the episode. The adults blaming kids thing was on point, and in this particular situation, the kids were the ones in the right because they were being blamed for something that they didn't do. Seeing them try to fight back by revealing secrets about the adults of Springfield was good, and it all leads to that standoff at the sign. The song, as I said, was pretty good. I very much liked how the old people hijacked it in the middle and decided to have a go at both the other groups. They even got their way in the end by imposing the curfew on anyone under the age of 70. I wonder who the only person who cast a vote was, by the way. In terms of the best jokes here, Homer's line of "Turn something on, I'm starting to think" regarding the radio was great. I also laughed at the 200 channels and nothing but cats from Jasper. Overall, this was just a very enjoyable episode that had an engaging story with some good jokes along the way too. Season 10, Episode 12, Sunday Cruddy Sunday. Homer meets a travel agent who offers to send him to the Super Bowl for free. All he has to do is convince all of his friends to sign up for a special travel package. So some quite well known trivia about this one is that the Super Bowl commercial about the Catholic Church making a few changes proved to be very controversial. So much so that Fox actually censored the scene in future airings. My best moment was Homer being scammed into getting his tyres replaced. This one gets a 2 out of 5. I found this to be quite a boring watch overall, which is actually kind of surprising given all of the action that is going on in the episode. I just didn't really care about any of it, because I was never given a reason to care. I mean, sure, they take a trip to the Super Bowl and find out that they have fake tickets. And what? You could tell that even the writers had no idea where to go from there because of what came after. They seem to fall in love with the guest stars and end up focusing far too much on them. I mean, it's literally Dolly Parton's corrosive makeup that gets them out of Super Bowl jail. Like, what the hell is that all about? Even when they get out though, all that happens is they run around, shouting for a couple of minutes. They also ended the episode with this kind of weird meta joke of football announcers recapping the episode. That also missed the mark for me. The Lisa and Marge subplot was utterly useless and it lasted about a minute at most. The only thing I could say in the episode's favour is that there were at least some good moments and jokes sprinkled in. I liked Homer's call to Lenny to convince him to go to the game, and as I said, Homer getting scammed by the car salesman about 12 because that's exactly the type of crap that they try to pull in real life. The jokes were still hit and miss overall though, and for every good one like those, you had a bunch that just left me scratching my head. Season 10, Episode 13, Homer to the Max. When a new television show features a stabby character sharing Homer's name, the real-life Homer enjoys a sense of fame. However, when the character is changed, Homer changes his name to Max Power to escape the ridicule of the townspeople. My trivia is that the TV show Police Cops from the episode is an homage to Miami Vice. My best moment was the Homer Simpson character as a dumb sidekick. A 3 out of 5 is what I gave this one. This is a plot that has some serious pacing issues. Seriously, Acts 1, 2 and 3 almost feel like different episodes. It takes a while to get going with the TV character having the same name as Homer. They use it to get the townspeople first loving, then ridiculing him based purely on how the on-screen character is acting. From there, they transition into getting Homer a new name, and again, they have some fun with it. Max Power is a cool sounding name, to be fair, and seeing Mr. Burns suddenly remembering Homer's name and respecting him is a good scene. From there though, things go off on yet another tangent, where suddenly Homer and Marge are getting invited to fancy parties. The bit about saving the trees literally comes from nowhere, and is resolved within the space of the last 2 minutes of the episode, so I don't really have much to say about it. It just ends so abruptly, and it kind of sums up the plot. It is a bit of a mess, really. What I like most about the episode though, is that it does not take itself too seriously, and because of that I can still have some fun with it, even if I was not invested in the plot. It has good jokes on a variety of issues. I love the "uh-oh, SpaghettiOs" catchphrase for the dumb Homer character. I also laughed at the line, "Nobody snuggles with Max Power, you strap yourself in and feel the G's." Season 10, Episode 14, I'm with Cupid. Apu showers his wife with Valentine's Day gifts, which makes the other husbands of Springfield look bad. My trivia is that Apu's rooftop garden from Lisa the Vegetarian appears again here, and the scene where Elton John performs for Apu and Manjula is of course a reference to Paul and Linda McCartney from that episode. My best moment was Apu inside his chocolate sculpture. So this episode is another 2 out of 5. They really are coming thick and fast, eh? So just to give you a bit of information, after finishing this episode I did a bit of research into the general consensus about this episode, as I often do, and I was a bit surprised to find out that this is quite well thought of by Simpsons fans. I must say I don't really understand why. The plot felt very tacky to me, and it even felt a bit similar to the previous Valentine's stories that the show has done. As a result, the whole thing felt kind of redundant. I also don't like the way in which the wives acted during the episode. They were all expecting extravagant presents, and none of them were giving anything in return. The way in which that dynamic was presented just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Not to mention the ending was all over the place, with hijacking a plane and a random uninspired appearance from Elton John. Even the jokes were average at best. The Apu one I mentioned was mildly funny, with him struggling to breathe, and the way he says that. But many of the others were too on the nose obvious. An example of that would be Moe's rope belt, right after claiming that Apu was making him look like a cheapskate. So yeah, I found this one very lackluster. If you are one of the people who like or even love this episode, I'm interested in hearing exactly why, and what parts of it really worked for you. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. Season 10, Episode 15, Marge Simpson in Screaming Yellow Honkers. Homer gives Marge a new Canyonero SUV after discovering that he bought a model for women. But, once in the driver's seat, Marge gets a case of aggravated road rage. So the trivia in this one is that the Australian zookeeper is an obvious parody of Steve Irwin. My favourite moment is simply Marge's road rage. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. Well, it is nice to see a Marge-focused story again, as I feel we have been somewhat lacking in them recently. It's fairly fun and fast-paced. But as usual for this season, there is not too much to the plot. I think it all works out in the end though. If nothing else, it's worth it just to see Marge's road rage. The way she gets slowly more frustrated at the drivers is very funny, and it's even somewhat in character for someone like Marge to have these bursts of anger in her. The ending was a bit over the top with the whole rhinos escaping from the zoo thing. It still gave Marge another chance to shine at least, and the way she used the Canyonero to save her family was pretty cool. The jokes here were okay in the main. I liked Homer's interactions with Lenny and Carl, both when he teased him for driving a woman's car, and the comment of, "There he is," in response to Homer being dragged down the street by the rhino. This was an episode which was action-packed and was also good for a laugh, and that is good enough for me. Season 10, Episode 16, Make Room for Lisa. Lisa starts suffering from stress when forced to share a room with Bart. Meanwhile, Marge discovers that she can listen in on the conversations of strangers. So that subplot with Marge was actually based on former showrunners Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein. They also used to listen to other people's phone calls through airwave signals. My best moment was Homer literally hiding behind the Bill of Rights. This one gets a 4 out of 5. This is another episode which has both the main and subplot being interesting. The stuff we get between Homer and Lisa is kind of what we've seen before, with him not getting her interests. Once again though, it is shown that he does care deep down and is willing to take Lisa to where she wants to go. Though completely ridiculous, I do like the journey that Homer makes in his little box. It is entertaining to see what Ned and Chief Wiggum do with it when they find it. I also like the end of Lisa and Homer's story, where Lisa lightens up a bit and is able to see things from Homer's perspective. The side plot of Marge eavesdropping on other people's phone conversations was also fun and brought many funny gags, and Bart's prank at the end just made it even better. The way in which Milhouse gets clobbered and both Bart and Marge shrug it off is great. The best joke in the episode comes from early on though. I do love Homer messing around with the Bill of Rights. The way in which he so casually removes it from a display case and licks chocolate off of it. Also, it is definitely a clever joke to have him literally hide behind the document. And it is topped off by the line from the guards of, "I am so sick of people hiding behind the Bill of Rights." Season 10, Episode 17, Maximum Homer Drive. After a truck driver dies of beef poisoning, Homer vows to finish his delivery. Meanwhile, Marge and Lisa make the best out of buying a new doorbell. So, a fact about this episode is that the title was originally going to be Homer the Trucker, and I'm glad they changed it to Maximum Homer Drive because it sounds way cooler. My favourite moment was the steak eating contest between Homer and Red. This is kind of the definition of a 3 out of 5 rating, and it's also kind of the blueprint for how episodes in this era often play out. You have a silly, inconsequential main plot, along with a short and pointless subplot. Neither really makes you care that much, and they're both just vehicles for the jokes. Homer getting another new job, this time as a truck driver, is not really that interesting by itself. So they tried to add some drama with the whole self-driving machine. Now that premise has probably aged reasonably well, given all the technology nowadays, but they still didn't really make the most of it here. It just ends with another wacky chase scene, in which Homer somehow escapes all of the mad truck drivers. Act 1 at the steakhouse was actually more enjoyable than any of the stuff that came after it. I liked the banter between Homer and Red, and there were some good scenes with Mr. Burns there too. The story of Lisa and Marge buying a new doorbell is just as bland as it sounds. It's basically just a load of waiting around until the doorbell is finally rung. Then we are treated to Why Do Birds Suddenly Appear over and over again. Now I don't mind that song, but that tune played consistently did become a bit annoying. The only reason I even rated this episode this highly was that I found some of the jokes good once again. Homer's hallucination of the cows talking was quite amusing, and there were a few good visual jokes in here too, such as the menus at the steakhouse and the list that the truck drivers had. Season 10, Episode 18, Simpsons Bible Stories. A boring sermon by Reverend Lovejoy sends each member of the Simpson family into their own biblical-based fantasy. According to the DVD commentary, this episode was a hard one to animate. This is because the animators had to create lots of new sets and designs just for this episode. The best moment for me was the non-canon apocalypse ending. This is another episode I gave a 3 out of 5. Right off the bat, it's crucial to say that this is the first time that the series experimented with this type of 3-part structure outside of a Treehouse of Horror. Now I never mind them trying something new, and this will become a more common thing going forward. Part 1 was a fairly basic Adam and Eve story that was solid for what it was. In Part 2, the parody was not quite as clear cut, but it was still enjoyable. The best bit of this story was some of the banter between Lisa and Milhouse, along with the way in which they managed to escape in the end. Part 3 was another typical tale of David versus Goliath. In my opinion, this one barely got off the ground, and the jokes were nowhere to be found. I didn't mean to rhyme there, but there you go. I think my favourite thing about this episode is that across the 3 stories, most of the side characters got into various roles. We got to see Flanders as God, Nelson as a giant, Moe as a snake, Principal Skinner as a pharaoh, among many more. Of course, some of these worked better than others, but it was just nice to see such a wide variety of characters used. The episode was still not very funny though, and as such, falls into the average category. Season 10, Episode 19, Mom and Pop Art. Homer's anger leads him to inadvertently create some homegrown artwork. This attracts the attention of a professional art dealer. So some trivia is that this was the first episode that Al Jean wrote since returning to The Simpsons writing staff. The best moment was Homer trying and failing to build his barbecue. This episode gets a 4 out of 5. This was just a nice little story that was quite well done. Seeing Homer get some possibly undeserved recognition for his rage is an interesting angle, and they managed to relate that to Marge's past as an artist. I don't know if Marge was in the right to get jealous or not, but it is understandable in a way, given that Homer didn't work for any of his success. They do at least come together in the end though. Now, there were a few scenes which were slightly disappointing, such as Homer showing all of his sculptures. That fell rather flat for me, and to be honest, I was expecting better. They managed to pick it up again by the end though, and Homer flooding the entire town was kind of a bold move on his behalf. Thankfully this time, it did pay off for him. The jokes were also above average for this season. I liked the Screw the Audience one about Homer being erased by Matt Groening. I also laughed at Homer saying that he must have been 100 feet tall in response to seeing a giant pencil. And last but not least, Ned seeing Homer float by just after saying that God had spared the righteous. I enjoyed the story and characters here, which is always nice, and I found a fair few funny moments too. As I said, it was only that one lackluster scene which stopped this from being a 5 really. Season 10, Episode 20, The Old Man and the Sea Student. After costing Springfield the Olympic Games, Bart is forced to do community service. In this case, it is helping the elderly residents at the retirement home. My trivia is that when Bart lets the senior citizens loose, they reenact the Can't Buy Me Love sequence from the Beatles movie A Hard Day's Night. My best moment was Springy, the Olympic mascot. We have back-to-back 4 out of 5s here. There was a lot of enjoyment to be found in this episode. The idea of Springfield getting the Olympic Games is obviously a bit silly, but the episode did present it in that way, in fairness. A few good scenes do come out of that, such as the preparation which Bart ends up ruining. Also, Homer's choice of Springy as the mascot is quite clever actually, especially for him, and most of the spring related scenes in the episode work for me. From Moe and Lenny getting springs stuck in their eyes, to Homer flashing them down the toilet. The bits with Lisa and Bart at the retirement home are more hit and miss, but still have their moments. It provides another good look into the life that Grandpa leads at the home, and as always it is kind of depressing. At least Bart gets them out in the end though, and they manage to have a little fun. I like Jasper's "you sunk my battleship" joke, and even the bit of Smithers painting Mr. Burns on the yacht. Now that ending of the boat getting destroyed and sunk is dumb. So dumb in fact that it does take something away from the episode. The best thing about the ending is that they managed to link it back in to the spring plot, albeit in an unrealistic way. Homer's stupidity of flashing the springs literally comes back to save all of their lives. Once again, this is not a great plot or anything, and it certainly has its flaws, but I found enough interesting concepts and funny jokes here to make this a good episode overall. Season 10, Episode 21, Monty Can't Buy Me Love. Mr. Burns tries to win the public's admiration by finding the legendary Loch Ness Monster. Some trivia is that there was a deleted scene from this episode which had Homer speaking in a Scottish accent. This scene was removed because Homer sounded too much like Groundskeeper Willie, and since Dan Castellaneta does both of their voices, it's hardly surprising. My best moment was just the Scottish residents. I gave this a 3 out of 5. It started out pretty well with the first act. The family trip to the store was fun and actually led into the story as well. I liked how boring Marge is portrayed as and how everyone, even Lisa, gets annoyed at her. Also, Mr. Burns shocking Flanders was a decent gag. The idea of Burns suddenly wanting to get people liking him came a bit out of nowhere. I mean, all it took was seeing another billionaire giving some money away. They started off on that premise well enough though, by showing how out of touch he is, and his appearance on the radio show really just hammered that point home. Once he gets that ludicrous idea to catch a Loch Ness Monster though, the episode loses me. It is just so silly. First they drain the lake, then Mr. Burns somehow catches it by himself off screen. Yeah, I don't even know how that happened. Then finally the monster is brought back to Springfield, where Burns goes crazy off camera flashes for some reason. Yeah, I really stopped caring by that point. They even end the episode with a lame joke about the Loch Ness Monster working in a casino. The only thing in the entire last half that I liked was the Scottish people. Just how uninterested they are by anything that goes on is pretty funny. Overall, this episode has some decent jokes and was on course to be a good one, but Act 3 was just so dumb that it does end up hurting the rating. Season 10, Episode 22, They Saved Lisa's Brain. Lisa is invited to join the local Mensa Society after penning a letter over Springfield's current state. So some trivia I have here is that Stephen Hawking says to Homer, "Your theory of a donut-shaped universe is intriguing. I may have to steal it." This line references real scientific theories that the universe is toroidal, a donut shape. My favourite moment was the ending. This one gets a 4 out of 5. This was one of the better main stories of the season. Notice I said main stories. Yeah, to get a small negative out of the way first, the Homer subplot of him modelling half naked was not very good. Nothing of substance came out of it, and it also felt very out of whack with the Lisa story. Thankfully it never went on too long though. Most of the time is quite rightly devoted to exploring Lisa's struggles with how the town of Springfield behaved. They did literally riot over nothing right in front of her after all, so it is not really unreasonable for her to expect something better from them. The bits where she gets into the Mensa group are also great. It is good to see that group of characters converse. Comic Book Guy is the one that gets the best lines in my opinion, but I think there are also some good lines from Skinner when he tries to confront Lenny and the rowdy group at the gazebo. It is also good to see the group start to turn Springfield around once they get power. Seeing the funny ideas they have is great, such as changing every light to yellow and spicing up letters with comic books. Of course it does all crumble down in the end though, once they start arguing with each other. The ending, with the help of a decent Stephen Hawking appearance, also manages to make a solid point. It is not as simple as just gathering the smartest people together and somehow creating a utopia. Everyone would of course have their own idea of what a perfect society would look like, and even if they could somehow all agree on it, it would be almost impossible to implement. Despite a few good ones which I mentioned, the jokes were only okay on average though, which along with the poor subplot, stopped this from being a 5. Season 10, Episode 23, 30 Minutes Over Tokyo. The Simpsons go on a budget holiday to Japan. However, when they lose their last 10 million yen, they have to participate in a Japanese game show in exchange for plane tickets home. So a bit of trivia is that battling seizure robots is based on a fairly infamous episode of Pokemon called Den-O Senshi Porygon, which had a scene that caused 685 children to develop epileptic seizures. And apparently, the producers got some flack for actually including that reference in this episode as well. My best moment was the running gag of Homer walking through the paper doors. So, the season finale gets a 3 out of 5. The season rounds off with another travel episode. This, like many travel plots from this series, was bang average. The concept of the family in Japan should have lots of interesting possibilities, but they never really make the most of it or explore them particularly well. I mean, it does jump quickly from scene to scene, giving us some obligatory sumo wrestling and Godzilla references. The scenes are just not strung together very well though, and as a result, it leaves the whole episode feeling rather pointless. The few jabs it makes at both Japanese and American culture do land though in the main, and are probably the best part of the episode. Another thing I have mixed feelings about was the game show ending. On one hand, it does a good job of satirizing certain elements of the Japanese shows, but on the other, the bit where the family have to win their plane tickets home felt kind of unnecessary. I mean, you really had to go with a fake pit of lava? Really? That about sums up my thoughts. This isn't a bad program per se, but it does lack much inspiration. And with all the episodes done, we move on to the summary of Season 10. So the overall average score for this season is a 3.4, which is a fair bit down from last year, and it's also the lowest so far. This is slightly worse than Season 1 in my opinion, which got a 3.5. Now to be fair, it is kind of hard to compare this season to Season 1 because the show has a completely different feel to it in both seasons, and Season 1 obviously only had 13 episodes, so it's kind of unfair in that way too. I'll get more onto my overall thoughts about this season in a minute. My top 5 episodes of the season was Wild Barks Can't Be Broken was my absolute favourite of the season. Lisa Gets an A was second. Treehouse of Horror 9 was third. They Saved Lisa's Brain was 4. And Mum and Pop Art was number 5. My bottom 5 for this season was Homer Simpson in Kidney Trouble was the worst. Viva and Ned Flanders was second. Sunday Karate Sunday was third. I'm With Cupid was 4th. And Simpsons Bible Stories was number 5. And that was considerably better than the other 4 on that list. So yes, that is the first double-digit season completed. Now onto my full analysis. This season is kind of right on the edge of what I would call good. I definitely think it is a net positive in that there were more great episodes than horrible ones, and there was a certain level of consistency to the episodes in general. Even in episodes where the plot didn't click or was silly, there was usually at least one redeeming quality about each one of them, whether that be in the form of some funny gags or a fun subplot. Some of the subplots here worked really well in my opinion, and actually increased my enjoyment of the episodes in which they were in tremendously. The biggest examples of this was Pinchy of course, and the Springy subplot in The Old Man and the Sea Student. These also stand out as a bit memorable as well, and help boost the season's reputation in my opinion. In terms of things I disliked about this season, many of the plots felt a bit shallow, and the great character writing that the classic era was known for is on the wane big time. Even where the plots were interesting on paper, they often went off the rails in Act 3, or just ended up being in a solid but not spectacular category. It also doesn't help that the bottom 4 episodes here were all massive stinkers, and Homer Simpson in Kidney Trouble is the worst episode of the show so far in my opinion. So to try and summarise my feelings on this, did I enjoy watching this season? Yes. Would I recommend it to fans of the show? Yes, I probably would. As long as you don't go in expecting greatness or something, you will likely find plenty of amusement here. Now, next season may well be a bit different, as I remember season 11 being one of the very worst of the show. I hope I'm proved wrong in the next video, but honestly, I'm not particularly looking forward to watching that. At least if it does all go pear-shaped, and I don't like it, I can vent my thoughts on here with you guys I suppose. But anyway, that discussion is for next time. For now, I'm signing off with this video. Thanks to anyone who watched, and as always, take care.